transparent with something that is happening, and we also try to be transparent with what is planned for the platform, which might pose a risk for you, or you might be able to prepare better if you know that there is a maintenance period coming up. To do this, initially we used a calendar that is on our transparency platform coordinator SharePoint site. And in this calendar, we logged every single event that we could possibly think of that is happening with the platform. This was good in certain senses, but it was harder a little bit for us to visualize it or quantify how well we are doing from different aspects. So we basically created a report. This report is still based on the SharePoint calendar. It's still manually updated, but as you will see, it is a much nicer view and a much more familiar view on event incidents and long duration maintenance for reduced capabilities of the platform. For this report, we also started quantifying the actual downtime. While the duration of an event can be a given period, the actual downtime or the actual time period where at least one of the essential services of the transparency platform was unavailable is usually a much shorter period. Taking an example of a single maintenance release to the transparency platform, we try to resolve around 45 minutes of time until our maintenance team restarts the servers and deploys the new release. In reality, this is usually about 20 minutes of downtime for the platform, sometimes even less. You will see that this report also shows a Gantt chart. You will be able to see overlapping intervals, and we are also filtering on what were the systems that were affected. What we try to achieve in this report, with the TP incidents report, is a really simple thing that whenever you think that something is not going to go right with the platform, this is the first thing you look at. If you have some doubts for an event date in the past, you can still use that report to go back a little bit, see if there was some plane maintenance, if there were some outages, if there was something that was not going completely normal and completely nominal with the platform, you will find it in this report. The report itself is a fairly simple view at first. Taking, for example, the past couple of weeks, what you see here is a Gantt chart on the actual events, and whenever you hover over a particular event, you are able to read the full description of the event. They are categorized into three main categories: unplanned outages, planned outages, and maintenance performed with no outage. So the first category, the unplanned outage, is probably the easiest to understand. This when something goes wrong without us planning to stop the platform or something, but that we lose a critical service of the platform. That does not mean that everything is affected and there is an unplanned outage. It just means that, for example, at least one integration channel is gone from the platform. For example, if ECP is done. Planned outages are usually releases. So are things that we plan that we are going to stop the platform for a given period of time. The reason behind this is most of the time maintenance. So we want to maintenance or upgrade, let's say. We want to be sure that it's performing the top of it. So we have to deploy some new code driving the platform. And then finally, there are maintenance tasks. Because there are a lot of redundant systems in the transparency platform design, and there are some clever tricks that we can do. Sometimes we do not have to stop the services of the transparency platform to maintain some of the infrastructure driving it. These maintenance are basically just for information. That means that you as an end user should not experience any downgrade in the performance of the platform. However, during the maintenance works, we have an increased risk that something goes wrong during the maintenance and it will actually cause an unplanned outage. We have then different filters, filtering through a particular date or filtering through environments. You can see that I'm only interested in the production environment, as in the transparency platform has three functionally similar environments. One for production, one for the interoperability testing, and one that they are calling the user acceptance test environment, which is for major releases if you want to test it before you are releasing it to the IoT environment. And then, as I told you, each event has a duration and has a downtime. So, for example, while the ECP channel was unavailable on January 2nd, actually on the night between the 31st and January 1st, we can see that the duration was 23 hours. Or we can see that there was another problem in the ECP on the 8th of January for another 2 hours. What you will see there is a short description describing the exact problem, what happened. So for example, in this case, we are upgrading to a newer version of the ECP channel that uses some web services to delegate some messages instead of some queues, and those web services had a limitation to 10 megabytes for certain type of messages. Once we found a message that reached that limit, it actually stopped working for a couple of hours. Once you click on a particular incident, you are presented also with a link that says check what happened this week. Once you click that link, you are able to see an overview of the processing for that particular week. If there are big outages, then this processing would have stopped, there would be gaps inside that. But as we can see, it's pretty much constant. Why is this constant and why there are messages received there? It's because some data providers are not using ECP. So what you would spot on this is that all these messages that have been processed by an ECP was out are actually coming through web services or other integration channels and not through ECP. But it's always a good idea to look into what happened during this period, during this outage. We also have a second view of this incident report, which we are calling processing by data item, where basically for a given period of time, we try to quantify how the platform, how well it did from a file processing point of view. This means that we take, for example, the duration of a maintenance work, let's say the same work, January 2nd, and we can take a look if there are unusually large numbers of rejected files, unusually large numbers of processed files, and overall take a look into the per data item breakdown of how much is rejected, how much is received, and how much is processed, and all of those. We also have an export option here. Clicking on the export will basically generate for us a Excel view of the specific events. So you will be able to spot the exact same outages, times, description messages, and so on, in case you will, on your end, would like to prepare reports on it or send this further along. Down here in the bottom of the screen, you will see a chart that quantifies basically per month how much was the duration of outages and the downtime of outages. As I explained a little bit earlier, the duration is the complete interval while we are planning on that outage to happen, while the downtime is the actual measure or estimated interval where the platform was unavailable, down during that period. We try to quantify also the environment this is related to. And here we have the three main environments that I already talked about. We have an FTP and we have a data warehouse, which are also the data warehouse is basically the database driving the SFTP exports and the Tableau reports. Okay, it's a fairly simple report, so there is not much complexity to it, but it's a good idea to start here when you try to investigate something that happened to our platform. For certain outages, we are also sending messages, so you might also receive emails before these are happening, but still it's a good idea to start here and to look into these TP incidents whenever you think that something is not dominant on the platform. Any questions?
I have a question from this related to the timeliness report. Are those timeliness then recalculated based on the outages of the system? Or how do you determine what is timely? So if I send, because my reports are sometimes completely the opposite way from what I get from the transparency platform. And that is because my system says, okay, the moment I deliver it to the ECP, that's the time gate when I say, okay, I have delivered it. But if I don't get a response because the transparency platform or their infrastructure or whatever is not working, I will still get a report from my system saying, okay, you delivered on time. It's not your fault, so to say. So do we compensate then in a timeliness report? Or if there's a day, an outage on the transparency platform, like occurred on the 1st of January, is the whole 1st of January then in the timeliness report read for everybody?
It's the option B, what you described. So basically on the timeliness report, we are strictly showing when the data was published and available for the public. If that data was not available for the public because of the platform, because you did not deliver it, because of any number of reasons, it's still going to be shown as was not available for the public or was published too late. So there is no direct relationship, but as you described it, there can be a relationship between an incident and what you are actually seeing on the end that is measuring when it was something published. If the processing is not working, if, for example, the incident that you mentioned that the ECP channel was not able to receive the messages, so basically they was piled up on the inbox of the transparency platform and was processing it and publishing it in time. Still, the result from the end user perspective was we are not publishing it on time, so this is what we are showing on the Git closure report, which is coming up by the way on the actual statuses of how much is published on time.
Okay. But then in that relation, you always have to show these two reports then to the market committee or the board or whatever, because if you don't show them together, there's a, well,
yes,
even for me, you know, if I look at the timeliness report, I also need to check this one, if the platform goes down, because else I'm looking into something which is not, let's say, my problem. So I always have to find them in relationship to each other.
Yeah, so that can be a complex factors into why something is published on time. But we are trying to show that report is just a number. Was it published, was it published, without factoring in the root cause. Okay. Any other questions related to this report? Otherwise, we will continue the gate closure report. Okay. Then this leads me to the next topic, which is our newest report of all, which is called gate closure. Excuse me. Which is called gate closure and completeness. Gate closure monitoring was a big part of the transparency stack, and even in the past, which basically means that for every expected value, expected in the sense that we described the data item monitoring already, we also define an interval of time when this is expected. For example, before this particular date, something is expected from you. Sometimes has also an opening, so we say that but he cannot submit it earlier than that. There are a set of complex rules on how to define this. It's mostly dependent on just the data item that you are providing the data for. But still, we always try to follow up on whether you are providing the data in a timely manner, or whether you not are able to publish that in a timely manner. What is expected again is based on what you are configured to provide in the configuration matrix. You as a data provider, even if you are second priority data provider, even if you are on the bottom of the list, you are still expected to deliver those values, and they are still will be measured by these reports. So keep in mind that, and also it is based on the allocation instance, the allocation calendar, how you set it up. So be careful if you are creating allocation instances, mistakenly to cancel that and so on. So have a correct representation there. What this report showed on the transparency backend, I'm not sure how familiar are you with it, is basically each value, and then a value has two statuses, either it was delivered on time, either not. It's not going into any more details than that. It's not going into, for example, by how much was late delivered, or by how much early was delivered. It's not going into at all into overall percentages, so how much for a given period or given interval, how much of the data was delivered on time or how much of the data was delivered late. And what is definitely not doing, you are not able to export that and share that with your peers, the overall statuses of this completeness and gate closure numbers. So what we ended up doing is we created this gate closure and completeness report, not on top of the gate closure monitoring on the transparency backend, but just straight from the data flow monitoring. So straight from when we receive the file, let's compare it to the actual timestamp. This enables us to actually calculate the delay and to actually know with millisecond precision how much is the delay, and we can categorize, and you will see it in the report that this enables us to draw a couple of histograms on trends of how much early or how much late you are publishing values. What we also did is, of course, we tried to calculate with some statistics on it, so to see overall numbers for any given period of per data item, per data provider, for a given area, and so on how much on time are you compared to what is expected. And then, of course, in this report, you are able to drill down to the lowest level to every single value and see what was delivered late and what was delivered on time. So you can do the full chain from actually seeing, as a data provider, how good are you in terms of percentages, until one time slot precision, and see for that one particular time slot when it was delivered and when it did not deliver. To drive this report, we had to do some improvements also on the transparency platform backend. And this was released with the last release last year, so I think it's 2.10.11. So basically all the data that you see in this report is just after December 20th last year. So a little bit over a month of data is already collected for this report, but generally nothing older than that. Let's take a look into the actual report. So this is the main page that we are seeing when talking about gate closure and completeness. Why are the two treated together, gate closure and completeness for this? It's really simply because something cannot be on time if it's not delivered at all. So whenever we are saying that you are 70% of time, we always have to put there that, and then there are 20% that you are not delivering at all. So actually from the values that you are delivering, you are maybe, I don't know, 95% of the time. But all the values that you are seeing here as on time percentage are calculated for what is expected from you. That means that the on-time ratio is always going to be smaller than what your completeness ratio is, or in the best case scenario, basically equal to your completeness ratio. If you send us 9 values out of 10 expected, and 8 of those is on time, that means that we have 80% on time. So that means that we receive 8 values on time out of the 10 expected, not out of the 9 delivered. It's very important. That means that the two values need to be somewhat treated together. This means that we need to talk always about missing data and completeness in a parallel way. And that also means from a more particular standpoint that this report can be used for much what is used for a data completeness report. However, again, a really important point that this report is not showing anything older than December 20th last year. So neither the completeness values, neither anything else is available in this report for older periods, while the data completeness report is basically showing everything since 2015. This is not. However, it is a good way to quantify completeness and on-time values. What we see on this first screen is basically just that. On the left side, we see two maps. Each value is attached to a country. If it's a value that is represented for a border, then it is attached to the in area, no, sorry, the out area. So basically the area that the value flows out from. This is just the easiest overview to look into which are the countries that might be lagging a little bit, which are the ones that are looking a little bit better. The red should not scare you on that map because everything under 80% is actually going into the reddish zone. So it does not mean under 50, it means under 80. And the top map is basically the completeness percentages, while the lower map is the on-time percentage. So it's basically how much was delivered on time and how much was not delivered on time. Then all the data that you are basically visualizing on the maps and on the middle of this graph can be filtered on the right side. You have two rockers that basically help you delimit the date of the data. These rockers do not refer to when the data was submitted, but the actual time component of the data. So for example, it doesn't refer that I sent it to data, load data for 2015. It's actually filters on the 2015. So it refers to the time associated to the data when the data was generated, not when it was sent to the platform. You can filter based on country, you can filter based on data provider, data item name, and area names. And once you created a set of data that you want to analyze, on the middle you can see it in a tabular format, just the overall percentages. Down there you can see a timeline, and on the right you can see the distribution of expected values. So this is the right bottom here. What you can see in the distribution of expected values is if we put in different containers, every single value based on how early or how late it was supplied, what would be the filling rate of those containers. So for example, we can see that if I look into a period of 1 month, from December 20th until January 20th this year, that would mean that on an overall level there is about 20% of data missing for that particular period. Does not mean that data that was supplied during this period, it means that data that has the availability rate of, so the data is actually attached to that period. And about 67% of the data was delivered on time, and then there are different percentages of delay or early submissions. If we filter more down to an actual data provider, for example, this distribution of expected values are helping us to spot different trends. We are now able to look into maybe there is something systematically wrong. Maybe my IT system is actually sending it triggered at wrong time, so it's sending it 5 minutes or 10 minutes or maybe an hour too late, and it's just a little bit of adjustment on my end to make that nicer. But sometimes it can also mean, of course, that there are generally a good rule, but for example, this 90-something percentages usually mean that there are exceptions when the platform was done, when my IT system was not going well, and so on. What you can see on this screen is basically on the middle is a table per area, but we can change that and see it per data item. You have this see by drop-down list. If you see it by data item name, it's still just an overall percentage per data item, and it's not broken down into per data item and area. So this is excuse me. This is just an overview page. What is important that is on the first page that you open up this report to, you are seeing only first priority providers. So unlike on the other reports, if you are a second priority provider, on the first page of this report, you are not going to be shown up. If you want to see all of your submissions, not just the ones that are the most important, then you have to navigate to the second page of this report, which is what we are calling by DP or by data provider view. Once you click this by data provider view, this is a customized view that is meant to be explored by a single data provider. We are no longer showing those maps. We are, however, showing all the different data items that you provide for the data item and area combination, and we are showing how much you are doing on the leftmost column, or how well you are doing from a standpoint of a completeness and from a standpoint of on time. You can see here that many of these are, for example, 100%, but then there are some which are not close. And what you can do is then navigate further now. So for example, I see here that I have, let me find something that is, okay, this one is, you can click on the number, and basically once you click on that number, you are now able to see value per value, what was submitted and what was not on time and what was not submitted at all. So basically what you see in this table is for the given combination of filters how we reach there. On the top here you can see a full table of every single time slot that we are expecting from you. Every line in this table is a full day, and every column in this case, for example, is a half an hour if I'm looking at it right. Okay. And then each value has two symbols. It has a symbol that is a rectangle, and it has a symbol that is a rectangle of 45 degrees, that one of their edges.
Diamond shape.
Diamond shape, yeah, that was the number.
But I like the workaround, that was very clever.
So the diamond shape, if it's green, that means that you provided that value. If it's red, it means that you did not provide that value. If the rectangle is green, it means that you provided that value on time. If it's red, it means that you did not provide that value on time. So that means that there can be scenarios where, for example, this one, the 29th, when we have the data, the diamonds are all green, but they are all late. So there are all these rectangles are red. As you can see, there is pretty much a lot of values on the screen. So what you can do, you can of course filter. You can just see, I want to see only the ones with delays. I'm not interested in seeing all of it. And we can see that there is one particular day when this was delivered, late this date item. And if I click on a single slot, then I can go even more deeper into it. And I can see when was that data actually delivered, when was the gate closure, and even how that gate closure is calculated or that gate opening is calculated. In this particular case, I can see that the resolution time and start date, so when the data refers to, and the gate closure date that is derived from that. So you can see that this is, for example, at the end of the day plus 1 hour, this gate closing rule, and what was the actual submission, and then you can see a category label which is basically saying that this was more than 2 hours too late. What we see here on the right is it tries to be a Gantt chart. This black bar here should represent basically the gate closing time, and the X is when it was submitted. Some data items have also gate opening times, so they can be delivered too early for something, and then you are actually going to see on that an interval showing in detail actual total load. So here the yellow represents the hour period when this load value could have been accepted as on time, and the X here means that it was missed by a couple of minutes in this particular case. It was very close to when it was actually expected. Now, there is two important things to point out with this report. One of them, we already mentioned this earlier a couple of times, is that if I, for example, for the values from January 1st, when my ECP was out, all the data providers who are using ECP to send data to the transparency platform are delayed. So all of their data is actually for that given period is going to show much lower values than for all the other days. You can maybe see how red is the map for the January 2nd. How can we export some of this? So how can you share some of this? Because these are, as you can see, pretty complex reports that on a single screen show you a lot of data. It is maybe the more difficult to share it around. What I generally recommend for you is to start from this screen that says gate closure by data provider. Try to zoom in on particular items of interest. And then once you have a list, you can always click on the download option. Then you can share this with your peers, what you downloaded from the platform. Okay. Before I get into the details more into this report, are there any questions?
Sorry, how is, again, were discussing a little bit, how was it the completeness calculated? From you brought this, if there are 10 data items, 9 were expected and was delivered 8, so it's 80%, something like that. Was it correct?
No. So my example was that 10 is expected, 9 is delivered, and 8 is delivered on time
Okay.
out of that 9. And the percentage would be 80%. So there are three big numbers. There is the expected number of values. There is what is delivered at all, which would be 9 in this case. And there is what we are calling on time, number of values. So if you look as a number of values, this is simple. However, when you look at as a percentage, what we are calling on time percentage is going to be on time over the expected, not over the delivered. The completeness is going to be delivered over the expected. So we are always comparing it to the what is expected, not to what is there, not otherwise around. So that means that the on-time percentage is always going to be smaller than what your completeness percentage is, because your on-time value is always smaller than what is delivered to the platform. You cannot be on time with something that you have not delivered.
Next question.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean right here also the numbers. This would be 8 per 10.
Come on, let's take a provider. How do you-
Your percentage by not delivery.
I don't do the math at home.
You don't?
No,
Why not?
I don't have anything to say at home. So
They've shut you up, have they?
years ago.
That happened years ago.
Okay, what if you heard at the methodology of the report, another important thing that I would like to point out as well is that the timestamp that is considered for the report is not the publication timestamp, but when the file was received by the platform, what we are calling the submission timestamp. That means that even if your file was processed for a little bit longer, and maybe it was published just after the gate closure time, it's not your fault. You are considering for this particular report that it's our fault. However, if the platform is down and it cannot receive the file, in the course of submissions are not in time.
That's a very, very stupid question. if we send an update over a month, but the on-time delivery will not change. Okay. It's the first
So that's the wrong part of this report, that you cannot correct this. So you cannot correct these values that are shown on the report. So once you are late for the party, you cannot
Overwrite.
So 80% is able to do that. The DeLorean, yes, my former boss. But his flux compensator is out of order.
Yeah.
What's feature?
So from this report, you will also get weekly a snapshot. Basically, a snapshot, you will only see the first couple of items on your report. You will need to navigate here and then figure out the exact dates where this is not happening. I would also really much point out the fact that this report is based on some rules configured on the backend of the transparency platform. There is always a possibility of an error, so if you don't agree with that report, let us know and we will investigate. Okay? So if there is something that you see that systematically is much lower than what you would expect, we can look into it. The other important thing here is that all timestamps, if you see a timestamp on the screen defined, and then it is on that time zone. So basically it means that all of these reports are UTC if there is no timestamp defined somewhere, and if there is timestamp, then every single timestamp on the report is configured to be on that particular timestamp. More concretely, in this gate closure monitoring, everything is in local time, for example. Once you drill down to a particular data item or a particular area, you can only see in the time zone of that area.
We have the impression that sometimes if we send for a new publication with the same value, that it is perceived as being too late. It's the same value, so it's not a correction.
It should not. It should not. If you have concrete cases that you suspect of this, let us know. But normally, we are only counting on the first submission for that value.
Okay, so we contact you if we
Exactly. So in particularly, what we are doing is we are logging the relationship between the value that is provided and the file when it was provided. So then we can go back and calculate for each value when was the first file submitted. And this relationship we only log in for the first submission. So what was, if you are sending updates afterward, it's not going to influence us at all. You will see that in these reports there are also tabs up there that you can navigate. The only report that you should use those tabs is in the completeness report. All the others have buttons or some kind of linkages between the views, so you will not need to use these tabs up here at all. You might be able actually to hide those.
Yeah, normally those tabs are already hidden in the links that I shared via email. But if you access it from the Tableau site, tableau.ENTSO-E, you will be able to see those tabs.
Some errors that we, for example, find generally in this gate closure report is, for example, load values that are provided in daily files, and the day is not corresponding to the day in local time. So that means that either the earliest hour or the latest hour in the file is submitted either too late or too early. This means that your percentages will look pretty good, but there is a systematic error that you can fix to have the submissions okay. What is also important that I have not pointed out so far out is that sometimes for a time slot and the date item we are expecting more than one values. This is a really good example, for example, the actual generation output per generating unit. If I go into details and find any particular area, I will be able to see that on the time slot screen, so the screen that is with the diamonds and rectangles. these values is actually representing multiple generating units. So while everything seems here to be green, there are multiple shades of green here. And what here is important is to filter and say that I want to see only the ones that are provided with delay. And soon you will be able to see that, for example, there are days when most of the generating units data is there on time, but some one or two is not delivered on time. So like this case, when most of the units are sent right at the beginning of the period, some are sent in the middle, but there is two at the end which are completely missing and are not on time, 2 units. The same goes for generation per production type or any of these data items that basically have multiple values for every single time slot defined. If you drill down, it might be that some values inside the time slot were delivered on time, but some did not. So that means that for this particular view, it will be a shade of between green and red, depending on how many those is actually. You can also hover a lot over things in Tableau. So whenever you see a graph, you can usually just point your mouse on it, and you will see a lot more details for that particular thing what you are looking at. This is really helpful if you are trying to analyze data, trying to figure out what is happening, that you do not really need to look up and down what I'm looking at, you will get a full description of what's there. You also have this button here which says export matrix to CSV. Once you click this button, there will be a customized view exported from Tableau with what you are seeing. For some reason my Tableau server is not cooperating, but that's what would happen normally. Gate closure, as well as the other reports, again has a refresh schedule. Every report has these timestamps put on it, where you can basically see when was this last updated. Even if it was updated today and it says now that it was updated on the 31st of January, that doesn't mean that today's values are good, because the updates usually happen early in the morning. So that means that if I try really hard to analyze values from today, it will probably either not show up at all in this report or show up as missing data or stuff like that. That is basically inconclusive. Again, the general recommendation is to go back maybe at least 1 day, or with more fuller periods in, for example, last week, Sunday to Sunday, or things like that.
It's a long day.
You want to maybe be like half an hour. So the next agenda item is quiz or coffee.
Coffee.
Well, on the agenda it says coffee, but we can go a break for 10-15 minutes and then move to quiz.
It's 2:30.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Like 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, let's give a break for 10 minutes, and then let's try to be back at 2:30. Huh? Oh, Wim, yeah, from me, yes. I checked on my phone. They just said that they are discussing internally and they will send something.
I received
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
they should answer.